we go, we're surrounded by digital technology and it is increasingly becoming a bigger part in our lives. We rely on it, and without it, many of us will struggle to live our day to day lives. Teenagers today have grown up in a world where information is at the tips of our fingers. From an early age, we become familiar with digital technologies, especially in this time of COVID 19, where we have become more reliant on it as it is one of the only ways for us to connect with those outside of our household. Without it, who knows how he would have survived with the months of quarantine. Therefore, I, Dami, decided for my personal project to investigate the impacts that digital technology has on our emotional health across different social classes, especially considering how COVID restrictions play into this. Before we get into the data I found, what is the personal project? Well, the personal project is a part of the IB, or International Baccalaureate's curriculum for Year 5 of the Middle Years program. By the time this documentary is done, I would have worked on the project for over the past 5 months. I wanted to investigate into this topic because of how relevant it is to the times that we live in, and there would be a lot of ongoing investigations that could support my research. Furthermore, two of my classmates and I created a suicide prevention video for our community project, similar to the personal project, but the aim was to support and help a specific community. If you want to check that out, then the link in the description below, and here it is here. Anyway, from that project, we found that technology, especially digital technology, was quite impactful on the emotional well-being of teenagers, and I wanted to find out more on these impacts, especially with the ongoing coronavirus pandemic. This led to me proceeding with an investigation to see how digital technology impacts our mental well-being from an international perspective. I conducted interviews and a study for primary research and collected a variety of secondary resources. To gain an international perspective, I wanted to see how the impacts contrast across different social classes. With this goal in mind, I reached out to 20 teenagers across the world to see if they could help me answer my inquiry. Teenagers from America, the UK, Nigeria, and Norway. Some of which I had personally contacted, who were like friends and family. However, some were through STEM Cafe, who are located in several countries in Africa. Here is some background information on STEM Cafe and their work. This interview is just going to help me for the documentary that I'm making based on the research that I have. The first question is, what is STEM Cafe and what does it do?
Okay, so STEM Cafe is a network of science discovery spaces. Presently, we have locations in Nigeria, in Kenya, in Uganda, and in Dakar, Senegal. So in these spaces, the aim is to expose kids and young adults to science, technology, engineering, and math in
Okay.
in fun ways. Through interactive, hands-on activities. And so the goal at the end of the day is to raise kids that have lifelong interest in STEM, in science, as the case may be.
Yeah. Okay. Um, how does the work that you do impact the kids that are a part of it, and how does it benefit them?
Okay, so these sessions that we have with the kids are facilitated by educators, and these educators guide the kids to explore science with basic materials around them. Uh, when they visit the cafe, we have some already made kits, and the idea is for them to interact with these science concepts through hands-on activities, and so kids are able to express their creative confidence, and they don't have any fears asking questions, expressing their ideas. They become inventors and innovators in the long run. But then generally, they have lifelong interest in science. The aim is to raise kids that build competencies by interacting with these activities, because we notice that in schools, kids are not really expressive. So the fun learning environment in STEM Cafe helps to bring out that creative confidence in them. They're expressive, they find it very easy to relate their ideas, and as much as they have these ideas in their minds, they can explore with hands-on activities. And also for kids who still go to schools, they are being taught concepts in schools, but they don't have practical experiences of those concepts. So when they come into STEM Cafe or they interact with STEM Cafe, they have an opportunity to interact with the science concept using hands-on activities. And so this is very beneficial to the kids because you find out that at the end of the day, you have kids that are really confident, and they have this interest in science. They don't see it as something that is very difficult, and regardless of the fact that we might raise kids that tomorrow might not be scientists, but all of them will be creatively confident and they'll all be able to express themselves.
And my final question is technology quite a big focus in like and how you interact with the kids, or it's also to guide them with technology?
Yeah, so yes, we really encourage technology. And of course, these things that the kids do are, yeah, are not really things that you say it's for the average people or it's for the rich or for those that are struggling, but it's a balanced society innovation, and it can cut across different sets of people. So yes, we encourage technology, and most of these things that these kids do, they have an interaction with some hardwares or some tools that are being used in the 21st century. If they are building robots, they are interacting with these tools or resources that can help sharpen their brains and expose them to useful technology even in the 21st century. So yes, we encourage learning, and most of the things we do also encourages the use of technology.
Cool. Yeah, thank you. That's all the questions I had. Before I get into detail, there are some key concepts that we must understand, such as digital technology use, teenagers/adolescents, and emotional health or mental well-being. So, what is digital technology use? Well, digital technology use is an umbrella term that encompasses various devices, services, and types of use. Digital technology are systems or devices that store, process, or generate data, and the most common digital device that teenagers use are mobile phones. Moreover, the actual use can be classified in certain ways. There are two forms of social media: social networking sites like Instagram and instant messengers such as WhatsApp. Different functions and services can provide different types of use. One can use social media more actively by communicating with others, sharing and liking posts, and as well as commenting. And one can use social media more passively just by lurking online and watching the content of others. There's also social and non-social use. Social, similar to active, is more communicating with others and just being more social online, whereas non-social can be certain types of gaming, reading, or even listening to music. Another key concept is teenagers or adolescents. Dianen and Johannes states that that is a time between puberty and adult independence. A teenager is around 13 to 19 years old, however an adolescent is from 10 years old to 24 years old. It's a time where there are a lot of hormonal and biological changes in the body, especially psychologically, which can have some impact on your mental well-being. But what is mental well-being and emotional health? Well, the World Health Organization, or WHO, define mental health as a state of well-being in which every individual realizes their own potential, can cope with the normal stresses of life, can work productively, and can contribute to their own community. Emotional health is similar to this definition, as being emotionally healthy means you're able to deal with the normal stresses of life, as well as recognize and manage your own emotions in a healthy way. Your mental well-being and emotional health can be affected by life experiences, biological factors such as genes and brain chemistry, or even inherited like a family history with mental health issues. As mentioned, due to the vast number of platforms and devices that are available to teenagers, it can create different types of use. Here are some facts I found on the digital tech use among teens. Well, several studies have indicated that teens use digital communication to enhance relationships by sharing intimacy, displaying affection, and arranging meetups and activities. The majority of US teens spend over 4 hours on social media, and over half of them say that they're constantly engaging. From the study that I conducted, I found that just over half of the average teenager's relations are based upon technological interaction. The top three platforms that were used were YouTube, followed by Snapchat and Instagram. As a result of the pandemic and online schooling, the most common motive of being on a screen or online was educational, followed by socializing and entertainment. And almost 100% of participants said that they somewhat or definitely relied more on technology now than before the pandemic. Well, the second key concept that I mentioned was adolescence and teenagehood, where there are a lot of changes that occur, especially psychologically. During this period in a person's life, the social world and peer connections become increasingly important, which means they seek more social approval from their peers, making them more vulnerable to peer rejection, acceptance, and approval. Furthermore, the cognitive abilities that allow teens to navigate through social networks and make decisions are still developing, which means in general they're more susceptible than adults to negative comment and negative interactions with their peers. This shows as it is a time of heightened vulnerability to mental health issues such as depression and anxiety, as 75% of adults said that they felt symptoms of such mental health issues before the age of 24. Dr. Tobias Diana speaks a bit more on this in a short interview that I had with him.
Adolescence, such a sensitive period in a person's life in terms of social and psychological development, and how does technology play into this?
Well, I think adolescence is a time of personality formation. People develop their own identity, their own personality, and this is that critical phase where adolescents start to become independent or more independent people, and they also need to find some distance from their parents, from their homes, and so this is like a developmental task. And in this context, in the first, say, 10 years, the most important normative group were parents and family, but this gradually shifts. And so regarding what's cool and what's not, and how to behave, and regarding values, there's a shift, and which then shifts to peers, and they become more normative. And this is in this process what makes this a little bit more delicate, if you will, is that adolescents and children are a little bit more susceptible compared to, or suggestible compared to adolescents. And so they are more easily persuaded or convinced of specific beliefs. And as a result, there is a certain higher vulnerability to adopt specific positions that might be, more peculiar or more risky or more extreme. With that said, it's not that adolescents are like completely different in a specific way. It's just rather they are very, very comparable to regular adults. It's rather that, and all these other things I've just expressed, they are also relevant when it comes to adults, but it's just a little bit more pronounced when it comes to adolescents. So it's not like that we're talking to different people, but rather with a more accentuated, say, situation. But that's what how I would describe that period.
And so, in your opinion, how impactful has technology been in mitigating the negative effects of COVID-19 on adolescents psychologically, just like being in quarantine and social distancing?
Mm-hmm. I have to say that at this point I can only speculate because I don't have any empirical data here, and also regarding the first question and the second question, these aren't questions that have a definite answer. They are very, very difficult, and we can only try to come up with more plausible positions, and it's always difficult to derive general statements that are always correct. So with that said, I think the major benefit of having digital tech during the pandemic is, of course, that you're still able to connect one way or another with your peers. And so, of course, social or physical distancing, which in large parts of the world people were forced to do, doesn't necessarily mean socially distancing, because you can still talk to people as we are doing it right now. And although it's surely correct that channels have different affordances, different features, which are more or less ideal for a certain communication context, the most important bit is to be in contact with one another. And it's much more important that people talk to one another than on which channel. So just take our example. I think the fact that we are talking is much more relevant than whether we are doing this via Zoom, via Skype, via phone call, or face-to-face. So this had definitely the potential to mitigate some loneliness, and which probably would have been there or more prevalent, more pronounced if these digital technologies weren't available.
So a continuation from the last question, if the pandemic had happened maybe 20 or 30 years ago, how do you think adolescents would have coped during that time?
Well, I think one trope which is always good to keep in the back of one's mind is that the kids are all right, in a way that it's not that I'm pretty positive that also 20 or 30 years ago, children would have, or adolescents would have found a way to interact with one another. And it's not that I would think that, oh no, at that time things would have been horrible and no ways of mitigating that. So people are very creative when it comes to dealing with difficult circumstances. But I could imagine that of course, the cultural and the means of dealing with such a situation would have been different. And I would reckon that there would have been more letters, that there would have been more phone calls. I mean, 30 years ago, we already had landline phone calls, so probably not as diverse, or context would have been, but more fewer, but maybe more intense, probably. So I could imagine that also 30 years ago, people would have resorted to media to overcome this physical distance.
In your opinion, do you think the impacts of digital technology differ across different social classes?
Yeah, again, I would speculate, but there are reasons to believe that there's a certain chasm, a certain Matthew effect, which is to say that, in other words, or which is a description for the rich get richer and the poor get poorer phenomenon, which means that often people who come from richer and more advantaged backgrounds, they have more power or skills to use these technologies efficiently, So I can, for example, I can share with you a personal anecdote or perspective. My wife, she's a primary school teacher. And so they did have classes, but they were remote, large parts, or at least during longer periods of time, stretches of time. And what she found is that the kids who came from an healthy or good family background, they were able to cope pretty well. They had the parents helped them. They had the resources to help their children. Whereas, and for some, maybe there were even opportunities to gain because they could work more tailored to their own needs. But whereas others where the parents didn't take much effort into the education of their kids, they got really they really fell behind. And this is something, this hypothesis, what one can hear often. Of course, I don't know whether how to what extent that's true, but it seems there's something to it.
Yeah, and my final question is, in terms of the well-being of adolescents, would you say it's more of a curse or a blessing, digital technology?
Well, I'd say it's both. It's definitely both curse and blessing, and which part is more pronounced depends on the individual case. I think we can conclude by now that there's a lot of potential. There are a lot of things to be gained. You can gain social capital. You can now actually even earn money via social media, for example. You can entertain yourself, and you can learn about the world, and you can work professionally, and all those things. On the other hand, there are of course also downsides, and probably the biggest downside is that that there's a too much. There can be too much of a good thing, and it's really difficult to control the use. And so, in order to also still do other things which are really important for us. And so I think it is something where we need to be critical, where we need to educate ourselves and a little bit help ourselves so that we can reap the benefits more. And what use exactly is then ideal then depends on the specific individual use case. In general, it seems that moderate use is rather to be recommended, and not excessive use, which on both ends, so complete abstention or non-use is not so much recommended, as well as overuse. And so finding the right way, finding what works, what not, maybe deleting one or two apps, and and also critically reflecting about one's own use. I think these are things to bear in mind, so that it's more of a blessing than of a curse.
Well, yeah, thank you for the interview.
As mentioned from the interview, digital technology can be both a curse and a blessing on the emotional health of teenagers. So let's look at the implications they can have on a social, physical, and emotional perspective. Well, the main obvious reason that technology can be good for our social health is that it's very useful in helping to keep us connected and interact with a wide range of people. This can be especially beneficial for those who are geographically or socially isolated, or even introverted and find it easier and more accessible to communicate online. Shared online communities can allow you to find like-minded people and give you easier access to support and positivity. This can even help save a life because of how accessible support is. From a study online, 68% of teenagers said that interacting on social media had helped them through difficult times. Furthermore, conversations online had helped reduce negative feelings after social exclusion. Similarly, from an experimental study, gaming online had helped teenagers bounce back after social rejection, despite not knowing the person they were playing with beforehand. Active social media users shown to improve well-being and maintain social connections. Some argue that relationships online lack the depth that in-person relationships have, and that while we've gained in a number of connections, we are sacrificing emotional satisfaction, intimacy, and trust. Despite this, others argue that all the social rewards that are available in an in-person conversation are also available in an online conversation. Research has shown that relying more on social interaction through technology can attribute to stress levels, and the lack of depth in online conversation can lead to a sense of isolation and loneliness. Lastly, just a number of platforms that are available online, people can portray whoever they want to be online. This can lead to identity diffusion, which is much harder in real life. This can be quite problematic for teenagers because this period in their life is a time of figuring out their identity. So they can struggle with identity formation because of how many people they could be online. Well, digital tech can have some impacts on our physical health as well, as we, especially in MEDCs, more economically developed countries, always have access to technology. So if we're away from it, for example when we're sleeping, there can be a fear of missing out. As our brains are also very active during the day, processing a lot of information, which is partially a result of digital technology, it's harder for us to fall asleep sometimes. Blue light, which is the light from our screens, also has an effect on our physical health because it can impact our eyesight. Furthermore, it knocks our melatonin percentage by up to 22%. This is the chemical that's responsible for the quality and how well we fall asleep. Moreover, our phones work at a frequency of 830 megahertz, and some research has shown that our brains are able to receive this frequency. Hence, if our mobile phones are close to us when we're asleep, it can reduce the quality and the overall feeling when asleep. As mentioned, digital technology impacts our emotional health and mental well-being. Generally, digital technology has a positive effect on our mental well-being through social interaction. It helps us stay interconnected with a wide range of people and have easy access to support and positivity. The use of digital technology has probably helped mitigate most of the negative effects of quarantine and during this global pandemic. Despite this, research shows that it's having a negative impact on our cognitive abilities and our emotional health in general. Higher Ed Live 2017 suggests that the increase in digital technology has decreased the attention span in the last decade, as the average attention span has decreased from 12 seconds to 8 seconds. This is a result of the environment that we live in, where information flows very fast, and our brains have developed to this by decreasing our attention span. This is a result of neuroplasticity, which is the brain's ability to form and reorganize neural connections. This decreased attention span is more pronounced in younger generations than older generations because of the environment that they've grown up in. As Dr. Tobias said, some effects can be shown with the Matthew effect, summarized by the rich get richer and the poor get poorer. Those who are struggling in their offline lives have a higher chance of being bullied, victimized, and solicited online. They also struggle to regulate the time that they spend online. More time is spent passively, and research has shown that high levels of social media use is linked to decreased social satisfaction. Digital technology can be quite impactful on addictive and destructive personalities as well, which increases online bullying as well as disinhibition or lack of restraint through social conventions. Many types of addicts can be impacted by digital technology as it gives them easier access to feed their own addictions. As stated earlier in the documentary, I conducted a study with 20 teenagers from different countries. Before I get into the trends I found, here's some examples of the questions I asked from 2 other participants.
So, how much time in a day would you say you spend on average online?
Well, usually it depends, if I'm not busy, with something else, like let's say, a chore or something, or I have to do something else, I can spend let's say, 15 hours,
Okay.
but if I'm free, I'm not doing anything, I can spend like 18 hours, almost 20. I spend a lot of time online,
Yeah.
I would say around 8 hours.
Nice. What digital technologies do you use personally?
I use my phone most of the time.
Okay.
I only use my laptop for, let's say, because I prefer typing on a laptop. I prefer typing. So if I need to type something, like something that's really formal or serious, I can just use my laptop. But social, interactions, I use my phone a lot.
Mainly PC, phone.
What platforms do you use on them, like YouTube or Instagram?
I actually use all of them.
Okay.
Like I don't really use Facebook like that, but I use Instagram, YouTube, Twitter, WhatsApp, Snapchat, all that. I use that.
I use YouTube, Snapchat, Instagram, and that's about it. That's the main ones.
So, in the place that you live, what's the current situation with COVID-19?
Well, it's increasing. It's increasing, and but the country is not on total lockdown anymore.
Okay.
It's more like a curfew kind of thing. Like at this time, you're not allowed to go out, but I mean during the day you can go out, but with your face masks on and hand sanitizers everywhere. So yeah.
Over quarantine, how has technology helped you deal with the social distancing?
Well, information online is very important, and as much as it is important, there's also fake information. So, technology helps us to filter, like real and fake information. Like, for example, I follow, internationally recognized organizations on Instagram, like, the WHO.
Yeah.
So, that way you can stay updated with actual facts and real information about the status of COVID-19 in the world, not just Nigeria. So I think technology has really helped, to keep you updated about what's actually going on. Yeah.
Have you has it been quite a big factor in helping you stay in contact with other people, or?
First off, it helped me keep contact with people. It also was helped me also educate myself because we had online school. Without technology, we couldn't do that, and also it's a good. It also helps you with boredom because you can't go around outside, so the only thing you can use is technology.
Yeah. In the questionnaire that I sent before, you said that you belong to an online community, like a Reddit community. In terms of COVID, has that helped you motivate yourself through this time?
Yeah, it helped me kind of keep happy because we were always laughing and keep me busy, and yeah.
I think so. Yeah, you know, when you're in a community where there's people in your shoes, like people you can relate to, it gives you this sense of belonging, like you can relate with them and connect with them. So I think it helps to an extent. So I would say it has helped to an extent.
Would you say that that has had more of a positive effect on your mental well-being?
Well, probably.
Yeah.
Probably because staying at home, in quarantine is so mentally draining.
Yeah.
Like you just stay at home all day. For teenagers like me, we have close to nothing to do, apart from schoolwork and stuff like that. So it's just like you're locked up in a room with just schoolwork, and it's so frustrating because you're just drained. So when you're in a community where there's people who you can relate to and connect with, I think it helps your mental health. It just makes you feel better. You don't feel so lazy or just so tired. You just feel like, okay, I can do this, and I'm not the only one in this, and I have people with me. So yeah, it has positively.
From the study, I found that use of technology and reliance on it had increased from before COVID-19 to now. As before COVID, 30% of participants spent over 5 hours online. However, that percentage now increased to 75% of them. The average screen time also increased from 4.7 hours a day to 7.65 hours a day. There is some contrast across social classes, as the screen time generally increased from those who had a higher gross household income to those who had a lower gross household income. Furthermore, the screen time after coronavirus increased in the countries that had a lower GDP per capita. The effect of digital technology on the emotional health of teenagers was both positive and negative. Of the participants that belonged to online communities, 85% of them said that they found support or alliance with those in the communities, and generally they had a better quarantine experience than those who did not belong to online communities. Furthermore, those who had a larger screen time increase stated that they'd be more negatively affected if they did not have access to such technology. This can suggest both a positive and negative impact. From one perspective, it could suggest that digital technology is having a positive effect on their mental well-being. However, on the other hand, it could suggest that digital technology has become more addictive and relied upon excessively. 15% of participants stated that they would be better off or unaffected if they did not have access to technology, which suggests that it's having no effect or a negative effect on their mental health. Research has shown that digital technology has helped mitigate or reduce some of the effects that would have been felt during quarantine. Orban, Tomover, and Blakemore 2020 said the implications of social and physical distancing could have been more profound in teenagers and adolescents due to this time in their life where social stimuli and peer approval are of heightened importance. Due to social stimuli being of a heightened importance, the physical distancing could have been more difficult for adolescents. However, due to the time this pandemic came, adolescents have opportunities and ways to mitigate some of the effects that would have been felt. In addition, I would like to add that due to the small cohort that my study was conducted on, the research from my study is not representative, and more research will need to be done to gain a more conclusive answer. However, as Dr. Tobias Dienen highlighted, even more experienced researchers have difficulty coming to a more conclusive answer because many of the concepts are quite open and it depends on how the individual interprets it. This is shown as there are a lot of contrasting research, especially since psychology and how people, especially young people, act is quite complex and a lot of factors play into this. Although in my opinion, I would say that the impacts that technology has is both positive and negative. Digital technology has created different ways and opportunities for people all over the world to be connected in quite a fantastic way. This can be especially good for our emotional health because having positive relations that are easily accessible can improve mental well-being. However, when the technological use becomes more addictive or destructive or more passive, it does not increase emotional well-being. People can find themselves being bullied or manipulated online, which can open ways for mental health issues. Where in some cases digital technology can help reduce the issues, in some cases it can increase it. Generally, moderate technological use that is more active will increase emotional satisfaction, but the extremes both high and low will reduce these things. The technological use does differ across social classes, but all in all, each individual uses technology differently, so they would be affected differently emotionally, physically, and socially. It's not just one thing that impacts your mental well-being, but several aspects. So my final message would be stay safe online, use social media actively but in moderation, and seek help or talk to someone if you're struggling online. That's it from me. Goodbye.